Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Burns. Today, I'm thrilled to be interviewing the Sunday Times bestselling novelist Ben Kane. I'm discussing his new historical fiction novel, Napoleon Spy, which is about somebody who gets caught up in Napoleon's famed invasion of Russia. So, I'm the author of the novel Royal Beauty Bright and the upcoming novel My Dear Antonio, and I'm on a mission to interview authors and see what I can learn from them. I met Ben Kane through a connection with one of my author friends, so I'm happy to have him. Thanks, Ben.
Hi, Ryan.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you. And
yeah,
yeah, no problem at all. Always happy to do an interview, and hopefully this will be fun for your
yeah,
viewers.
I'm excited. I'll do a quick introduction of you. So, Ben Kane is a Sunday Times bestselling novelist. He specializes in historical military fiction, covering everything from ancient Rome to the Crusades to Napoleon. He's mastered the ability to combine the accuracy of historical military campaigns with nail-biting action. Ben was born in Kenya, where his dad worked as a veterinarian. When he was a kid, he moved back to his home in Ireland, and I believe he worked as a veterinarian himself in the 90s. And he took a lot of travels around the world that we'll get into. He walked the Silk Road, he walked across Italy, across Hadrian's Wall, and definitely want to talk more about that. Ever since then, he's had a huge interest in travel and how that combines with history, and I think that is what led to his passion for writing. His most recent book is about the Napoleonic era, with his new book called Napoleon Spy. It came out on May 25th. I gave it a read, and I'm excited to talk with him about it today. So thanks, Ben. Would you mind giving us a quick summary of Napoleon Spy and tell us how it came to be?
Sure. Yeah. I work some of the time, generally in the summer months, as a guide for bike companies that do epic trips. I'm talking 3 to 6 weeks in length. So you can cycle from Barcelona to Rome over the Alps. That's called the Hannibal. There's one from Paris to Moscow. It used to be, even before the war, it had moved to Petersburg. Now it ends in Tallinn in Estonia, and that's called the Napoleon. And I don't just work as the bike guide. My main job is to be an historical speaker. And so 2019, I did the first week of the Napoleon. And I mean, I can talk about pretty much any period of history, but if I'm going to do it in public, I'll research it. So I read this extraordinary textbook called 1812 by a British historian called Adam Zamoyski. I thoroughly recommend it to your viewers. It reads like a thriller, but it's an historical text, and the man speaks, I'm going to say, 8 languages. So he hadn't just gone to the first-hand accounts, of which there are more than 150 in French. He'd gone and read Polish ones and Italian ones and German ones. And this book was so extraordinary. I knew a little bit about Napoleon's disastrous invasion with 500,000 men and 140,000 horses, but I had no idea quite how catastrophic it was and how rich the history was. And the upshot was that I was so excited. I just said to my editor, I've got to write this book. And 4 years later, it came out. So it was, I have to say, it was quite traumatic to write, because the accounts of the mortality and the suffering that these Frenchmen and men of many nations, not to mention the Russians themselves, because I mean they were the people being invaded. It was just crazy. So yeah, that's how it came about.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Normally, I keep my interviews limited to just the book, but I feel like you have such an interesting life that we wouldn't be able to fully understand the book without understanding all of the adventures that you've gone on over the years.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've had a bit of a varied career. I mean, I worked as a veterinarian for 16 years. And one of the times I worked was during the foot and mouth disease outbreak in 2001/2 in Britain, which saw more than 5 million farm animals slaughtered. And I was doing that for 7 days a week. And I
Wow.
spent loads of time on Hadrian's Wall. That's where I was working. And I ended up thinking I'm going to write about Roman soldiers, which is how my first novel came about. So, you're where you are in life often shapes what you end up writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you mind explaining to the audience if they don't know what Hadrian's Wall is? Or,
Sure. Hadrian's Wall is the remnants of a wall built by command of the Emperor Hadrian between the years 117 and 123 AD, so 1900 years ago, and it was built from the North Sea to the Irish Sea. So it crosses from the east coast of England to the west coast of England, quite close to the border with Scotland. It's 84 miles in length, and it was garrisoned by thousands of soldiers. And it was not what a lot of people think, an impermeable security barrier like the Berlin Wall, say, in Berlin, Cold War era. It was something to monitor what people were doing, coming and going. And there was a gate every mile, and people used to be coming through pretty much probably all the time, but that's what it was. And its remnants are still there, along with the remnants of many, many forts. Every 5 miles or so, there's a big Roman fort, and it's pretty much all countryside. So, nothing, it's still there. It's very easy to imagine what it might have been like, because unlike a lot of Roman ruins, say in a busy city like Rome, where you're surrounded by modern everything, vehicles and people, in countryside, it's much more dramatic and atmospheric, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure with all of the fog and the mist and everything, and it's so remote. I'm sure
Yeah.
that it's such an interesting site. And living near that got you interested in writing about ancient history. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I was it's in this world of smartphones. It's probably hard for a lot of people to even imagine, but I grew up without a TV. We came back from Africa, and my parents saw everyone had a TV in their house, and they were all glued to it. So they didn't get one. So I grew up reading books. I lived in my local library. I moved into the adult library age 12 because I've read everything in the kids' library. And history and fantasy were my two big things that I loved. And
Yeah.
although I went to study to become a veterinarian, because that's what my dad did, my second choice, if I hadn't got that in university, would have been history. But life took over, and when you're into most jobs, and you're in your early 20s, you just get on with it. And so it wasn't until I went traveling. I spent 3 years backpacking. I spent a year in South America. I did the Silk Road, like you say. I worked in Australia, New Zealand. I drove across 20,000 miles across America in a camper van, which was awesome. Amazing place. And I came back from that wanting to write a novel, but it took another 4 or 5 years before I did. And the spark for it was the year spent in Northumberland, which is the part of England in which a lot of Hadrian's Wall is. And my idea was either to do Vikings or Romans, Vikings being much more important in Ireland because the Romans never went to Ireland.
Oh yeah.
But Bernard Cornwell's first Uhtred book, some people may know The Last Kingdom on TV, and that came out, and I saw it in the bookshop window, and I literally thought, oh, I can't do Vikings because Bernard Cornwell's doing them, which of course
Yeah.
was incorrect. But Gladiator, the movie, had been out the year before, so it was coming, sword and sandals type stuff, as they're known. They were coming back in after decades of not being popular in the cinema. And then you had authors like Stephen Saylor, and you had British authors like Simon Scarrow and Con Eagledon writing Roman stuff. And it was becoming really popular. So I did pick a good time to get into that area. And well, they did really, really well. So, I mean, I think I wrote 11, 12 books before I did a non-Roman one, because the
Hmm.
publishers are very conservative. I don't know about in America. So, when you're doing something that they sell lots of, they go, just write another one, please.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Like you mentioned, you did a march for charity across Hadrian's Wall. You were dressed in full Roman military garb.
I've done it
Is that
twice,
right?
actually. I've
Wow.
walked Hadrian's Wall twice in full Roman gear. Yeah. Why, people say, ended up raising a lot of money for veterans charities and Doctors Without Borders. And quite to my surprise, like the first time, it was me and two friends dressed as Romans as well, the first time, and we raised nearly 50,000 US. And
Wow.
it's a lot of money for charity. And then the second time I did it with my 11-year-old son, bless him, who did the whole thing in six
Wow.
days. And we raised probably 25 or 30,000 US dollars. So, when you can do that, it's worth doing. We actually did a walk in Italy as well, that me and my two
Wow.
friends.
Yeah.
So we walked from Capua, which is where the amphitheater that Spartacus, the famous slave who escaped and led a huge rebellion, it's where he was fighting. And we walked from there to the Colosseum in Rome, and we filmed it. and we
Yeah.
tried to get it on TV in this country, and we so nearly got there. We got onto the short list for a few film festivals.
Ooh.
Long and the short of it is we didn't, and it's now on YouTube. So it's got the most amazing voiceover because Ian McKellen, Gandalf, did the voiceover for us for nothing because we were doing it for charity. So
Wow.
look up if anyone wants to spend an hour and 10 minutes of their time, they can look up Romani Walk, just Roman with an I, Walk on YouTube. And the voiceover is good anyway.
Wow. That's so cool. Yeah. All the viewers, you guys should look that up. Yeah. Romani Walk. How did you get Ian McKellen to do the voice for it?
So the director, who's a friend, a really small film company,
Yeah.
he knew that Ian McKellen does a lot of charity work. So it was one email, and an
Wow.
hour later, his PR email back saying Serene would be delighted. When would suit you? Just like that. I mean, it was literally that simple.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
Sometimes things just work out. That's great.
yeah, they really do. So, I mean, I went up to London to meet him. We all did when we went. We had to hire a recording studio in London, and we were all basically falling over ourselves with, just absolute delight to meet Gandalf. He
Yeah.
was so friendly and polite and professional. And what's quite funny is that the director did the script, and Ian McKellen read it through once. He just sat in the sound booth. I'd never been in a recording studio. He sat in the sound booth and he read it through once really fast before he did it. That's all he needed. But there's a line in it when we came to the Roman entrance, the ancient walls of Rome, when there were these reenactors, Italian reenactors, friends of mine had met us in kit. So we were, they were saying you can't come in unless you have permission. And the director put in the line, "You shall not pass." And Ian McKellen literally looked out of the soundproof booth, and just this one eyebrow went up like this. And the director just shrugged like this. And Ian McKellen didn't say a word, and he read it out in the film. And the director says, on his tombstone, he's going to have, "I got Gandalf to say they shall not pass." So it was "they shall not pass."
Oh, that's awesome.
It was really funny.
That's so cool. Yeah, so it seems like all of your travels and your adventures have definitely informed your writing a lot. And so this book, Napoleon Spy, that I read, it's about this man, Matthew Carey.
Yeah.
He is kind of a gambler and he's very much in debt. And one of the ways to get out of his debt is to help smuggle French prisoners of war during the Napoleonic Wars. He gets tangled up in that, and then next thing you know, he's off on an adventure on Napoleon's fated invasion of Russia. So it seems like recently there's been a resurgence of interest in Napoleon. There's the Ridley Scott movie that just came out about Napoleon. What do you make of the new interest in that era of history, and what led you to write about it?
Well, as I mentioned, it was just happy coincidence that my book came
Uh,
out. I knew about the Napoleon film, but I was already committed to writing the book, before I knew about it. As part of me wishes that it had come out at the same time as the film, because obviously that might have helped sales quite a lot. So, I think these things, they seem to go in waves, and those great big blockbusters about the past that I mentioned with Gladiator, who of course was Ridley Scott as well. They've really come back in the last 20 years, and it's one that I don't know how much intercross there is between moviegoers and people who read books, but you can always hope that there will be. And it's it's funny because I don't think that I'm going to enjoy the Ridley Scott film because I've heard so much about it and I know enough about the period. It's not accurate.
oh,
So I don't know about you, but when I go to see a movie and I know anything about the subject matter, I often find myself getting annoyed because Hollywood always takes great big, leaps, and they just decide something looks better, like shooting cannons at the pyramids. For me, to me that's actually not that bad an inaccuracy. There are other things I've heard. I tried to avoid it, but um one of the things I do find frustrating is that although people love to visit the past, whether it be through movies or books, is that people don't seem to learn the lessons of the past.
Yeah.
they just keep on repeating. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the Ukraine war is different because Russia was the aggressor, but it's in the same area where it all took place. And the Germans, Hitler's army invaded Russia 130 years after Napoleon, and he didn't learn. He could have avoided a really bad. I suppose it's good that he did in a way because
Yeah.
that's what broke Germany. So um, World War II might have been, might have, well, who knows? It might have gone a different way, or it might have taken many more years to defeat Hitler. So, but yeah, I mean, I'll accept that if people go to the movie and then they're interested to find out something else, that's good. It's all, I don't think we can be too precious about it has to be exactly correct, or you tell people not to go and see it or whatever.
Yeah.
After all, novels, man, just like movies, they're all about they're about the story. But with novels, with my novels anyway, I make them as accurate as I can because I won't cut corners and I won't tell untruths. I did a little bit with my first few novels, but I don't do it ever for the last 10 or more novels because it's really important to be as accurate as possible, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think your background definitely helps from all of your adventures and trips. I feel like it gives you kind of the lived experience of, marching these long distances and these remote places. I think you can do all of the book research that you need to, but you need the sensory research where you figure out what it feels like to be that tired and
Yeah, I agree with you for myself, and I think you obviously think that too. And but then there are some people who don't need it. So there's an amazing author called Steph Penny, Penney, who wrote a book called The Tenderness of Wolves.
yeah,
And she is British, and she wrote a book set in the 19th century in Canada, out in the middle of nowhere,
yeah,
about this little settlement. And it's about this woman and what happens to her. And it is the most extraordinary novel. And the description of the winter in Canada, which of course would be like a lot of the middle of America, same kind of weather patterns, really hard winters, lots of snow and so on. The description of it is extraordinary, but because she's whatever the word, I can never remember, she's afraid of flying. So she didn't go to Canada to do any research at all. So she's never been there.
wow,
Um, and I think of an author called Rosemary Sutcliffe, who's very popular here in the United Kingdom, and she wrote mainly children's novels. And they're descriptions of the ancient world, whether it's ancient Britain or ancient Rome or Saxon times, are just off the scale good. And she had some kind of awful disease, which meant that she was confined basically to a wheelchair for most of her life
yeah,
and never married, never had kids, yet she writes these rich novels about parents and their children and stuff. So some people can do it, which is just extraordinary. But I much prefer, if I can, to go somewhere and get a sense of what it's like. So yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's pretty insightful. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that is it true that you are still work as a veterinarian?
No, no, no,
No.
no.
Oh,
My
okay.
15-year anniversary of giving up is in about 3 days, I think. So
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah,
So that's just how you started. You started out in
yeah,
that career, and then okay,
yeah.
yeah. So 6 out of your 8 books, I believe, have been Sunday Times bestsellers.
If you got that from Wikipedia, I mean, I don't know who
Sure.
does my Wikipedia page. No, that's wrong. So I've had
Okay.
18 books out, and 11 of them
Yeah.
have been Sunday Times bestsellers, and I'm published
Nice.
in 14 languages as well. So
Wow, that's awesome. Um,
yeah, it's quite cool.
yeah, and yeah, and you balance that with being a parent, and you said you incorporated it with your parenting, like you took your son on the trip across Hadrian's Wall with you, and
Yeah,
that
so
seemed like so much fun,
yeah,
kid.
I don't know what the new way people log into work is, but like back in the 80s or 90s, you used to have to sort of put a little card in a machine in the wall, and it would clock you in and clock you out. I
Yeah,
wish I could clock in and clock out to know how many hours I work in a week and in a year, but I am able to take a lot more vacation than I used to as a veterinarian. But yeah, I mean, I'm divorced for the last 3 years, but I've always been at home when the kids were babies and little, because I work from home, I was always
Yeah.
there. So my thing was breakfast. So I would do breakfast for the kids and see them off to school. And then, I was always there in the evening unless I was away doing a talk or something like that. So that's been a huge benefit of being a full-time author. And then I do quite a lot of talks in schools ever since the Hadrian's Wall thing. Quite a lot of private schools in this country teach classics and Latin.
Hmm.
And I go in dressed as a Roman soldier and I talk about everyday life in ancient Rome and everyday life as a Roman legionary. And I talk about Roman Britain and gladiators and, so on and so on. And then I also, I do this bike guiding work. Now I don't do very much of that because I have to go abroad for however long. But my kids, one of them's finished secondary school next year. So, in the next few years, I will be able to do a lot more of that. And I also, just getting back into, I lead tours in Italy. So you book a tour with, there are companies in this country and they are in the US as well, where they take people to places of historical interest. So, your flights are covered, your bus is covered, your hotel and your meals, and you have an expert guide, and I do that in the Pompeii area. And I'm
Oh,
doing a
cool.
Spartacus tour next year, which should be really good fun. Like 8 days of going around sites that where Spartacus would have been and telling people about it, which is, to me, it feels like a holiday and it's work.
Wow.
I'm very lucky actually.
Wow. That's interesting because you also contributed to the book about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, since
Day
you,
of Fire. Yeah.
yeah, and you give tours at Pompeii. So I couldn't think
Yeah.
of a better match. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun book to do. I mean, Kate Quinn and Sophie Perrineau and the others who became friends through it. They actually did a few more. They did one about the French Revolution and another one set in ancient Greece. And I just didn't have the time to commit to that because I also do every year, every other year, I do a crowdfunder. I let my readers vote on Facebook for who they want me to write about, and then I write a novella and the people who back the crowdfunder get to read it. No one else does for 3 months, and then I self-publish it on Kindle. So that's quite a nice little thing to do as well, because for me, I'll never, when you've written loads of books, as I'm sure you will, in however many years, you'll probably never, if they're standalones, you possibly never revisit those characters again. And doing a novella allows you to do that. It's really good fun. It's like, oh well, what happened if he went off and did this? And it's only 25,000 words long. So so there's one character who's a veteran centurion who's in a trilogy of mine about the Varian disaster, which was 3 legions being wiped out in Germany in '89. And I've now written one, two, three novellas about him and 2 short stories. So there's quite like a rich, and there's one from when he was a kid before he joined the army, and there's one when he retired, and it's really nice. You get this relationship with your characters sometimes that you never knew would happen.
Yeah. That sounds like a pretty interesting way to have outreach with your readers. Definitely.
Yeah, readers love it. So I auction. You can bid to depending on your subscription level for the crowdfunder, you'll have a chance of being a minor character in the story, and people just they go crazy for it. The fans.
Yeah.
So
I've
there's one American guy, Bruce Phillips, really nice guy, and he must be in like 4 or 5 of my novellas, and he's in a couple of my novels. So when I do it in my novels, that's not money for me. If you want to be in one of my novels, that costs quite a bit, but it's donation straight to charity. And Bruce Phillips is like bang every time. So it's amazing. It's a really good way of raising money for charity as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. I've never heard of a writer doing that. That's pretty cool.
I got the idea from somebody. Goodness me, who was it? But I think they just did it as a once-off. But I've done it for years now, and in fact, my Viking novel, Stormcrow, which is coming out next year, people were banging on the door for that, going, I want to be a character in your Viking novel. And I was beginning to feel a little bit owned by the minor characters. So
Yeah.
I just said, sorry, guys, no one's in this but what comes out of my head. And there were quite a few disappointed Viking fans, but I was having to think of special scenes for a minor character instead of just letting the story unfold. So Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, do you have a copy of Napoleon Spy with you?
I
Or
do, yeah, yeah. You said you wanted me to read maybe a page or something like that.
yeah, yeah. If
Okay.
you have a good spot that you were
Yeah,
thinking of,
of
okay,
course. Yeah,
sure,
thanks. I have to say I don't normally read bits out of my own books
okay.
when I'm giving talks and stuff because I find it a bit embarrassing.
Oh,
I don't know why, but I do. But um I'll just quickly explain for your viewers. The book is about the invasion of Russia, but an important subplot is the main protagonist's duels with a French army officer that he gets on the wrong side of. And multiple
oh yeah.
duels between the same people were actually quite common back then. And there's documentary evidence of that. So, but the first duel, I'll just read you a little section from that. So it happened in a park in Paris, the Bois de Boulogne, which is beautiful. If you ever go to Paris, you'll walk through it, and that's where people who were in Paris and who were dueling, that's where they would go. And I mean, it was big in America as well. Actually, viewers probably know that. So his friend's called Guillaume, and the main guy's called Matthew Carey. Guillaume proffered the pistol and said, "Turn sideways." I obeyed. "When I let my handkerchief fall," said Bachasson, that's the second for the other guy, "you may both shoot. Understand?" My yes came out as a croak, so dry was my throat. My heart was racing as if I had drunk half a dozen cups of strong coffee. Breathe, I told myself, breathe. Guillaume touched my shoulder and went with Bachasson to the halfway point between me and Ferrol. They stood well back, but near enough that we would be able to see the handkerchief. "You may raise your pistols and cock." Carefully, I drew back the curved metal that held the flint. I lifted my arm and pointed the pistol at Ferrol, staring down its barrel at his smug, moustached face. Bachasson's handkerchief was a little white square on the left side of my vision. Ferrot filled its center. His weapon appeared to be aimed at my heart. How bad would the pain be, I wondered. Would I feel the lead ball rip into my flesh, tearing blood vessels, shattering bone, or would I just fall to the turf, severely wounded? No surgeon was present. I did not know one, and Ferrot had not offered to bring one, probably, I thought, because he expected to emerge unscathed. "Ready?" called Bachasson. "Yes," we chorused. Guillaume had told me that a duelist's greatest test was from the time the word ready was given until the handkerchief dropped. Until that moment, I had not appreciated the saying's truth. Never had the seconds stretched so long. I felt every beat of my fearful heart, each shallow breath. My right arm stretched out in front of me, elbow locked. My finger was tight on the trigger. Down the barrel, I could see Ferrot, his eyes, his pistol. On the edge of my vision, a flutter of white, heading groundward. Bachasson had dropped his handkerchief. There we go.
Wow, I remember that part from the book. I thought
Good.
I thought
Yeah.
that was such a good moment. I don't want to give anything away, but I thought the character development was pretty good of
Oh,
like
thank you.
the decision that he made at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll quickly explain to your viewers. I've never had an anti-hero. I've always had, especially in my early books, they were cardboard cutout heroes, and I think they've got a lot deeper since then. And I've tried to have my characters have flaws, but I've never written an anti-hero until this novel. And I've had quite a few. If there've been some negative reviews, they've often been because the reader hated the character so much, which has never happened to me. And although, no one likes to see bad reviews, now I just kind of go, good, because that means I did create an anti-hero because people didn't like him. So, he's not all bad. He's got bravery. It's just he's a civilian who doesn't fight. He doesn't want to be in the army. He doesn't want to kill people, but he's in this dreadful situation and he's a gambling addict as well.
Wow.
So I had fun writing him, trying to work, trying to make him as nuanced as possible. So
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. It's great to hear from such an accomplished writer.
Oh,
Yeah,
great. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you. It's been
yeah.
fun.